Gator Bill, this is your protege, isn't it? And I'd be like, no. Like, there's no way I want to do this for a living. Hey, how's it going, guys? My name is Frank Alligator Robb. I'm here to visit my buddy Chance the Snapper. You can see here in the background. It was 5 years ago yesterday that I was in Chicago and caught Chance. What an amazing story that was. Not sure people really understand the entire dynamic of that in my life, and truly God's blessing and the way it all came together. That was 7 years of the day when I caught Chance of me accepting the Lord into my life, and that truly saved my life. Many people don't realize the impact that had on me, but it was about a year after that I found out I had to have heart surgery. I remember my doctor telling me, Frank, it's time. I said, well, what is it? It's time for what? What are we talking about? Well, it's time to have that valve either repaired or replaced. And since I had had a chest surgery when I was a kid, it was going to be very tough to find a doctor to do that surgery for me. So he told me to start reaching out to doctors and see what I could find. I had reached out to many, and many had told me no. And I ended up reaching out to my friend Dina Bear up in Chicago at WGN and said, hey Dina, this is what's going on. And she put me in contact with a doctor who I had a meeting with, told me he wasn't the guy, but he knew a guy. Ended up contacting this guy with Shands. Interestingly enough, a guy that had trained under the thoracic surgeon who did my chest surgery as a kid. Very interesting correlation there. And he told me, you know what? I feel pretty good about it. I think I can work it out. Yeah, from that point, I had open heart surgery with the doctor they found, and it's been 3 years ago, in a couple months for that. Remember sitting at home one Saturday morning and getting a call from a lady named Kelly Gandersky, and saying that she had talked to Jen Anderson up here at the St. Augustine Alligator Farm, and she had talked to the people of the state of Florida and several other groups, and her and the mayor had made up their mind that they needed to bring somebody else in for this alligator issue they were having in Chicago, which I had heard about. My uncle and I had been talking about it and wondering, this is a pretty strange situation they have going on there. Wonder if you'll get the call, which when the call came in, that was very humbling to be considered for something like that. Figured, you know what, if I can help an animal, that's a pretty easy choice. She said, well, you know, how much would something like that cost? And I remember going, oh, what do you charge somebody to go to Chicago and catch an alligator? I don't know, pay for my expenses and a couple $1,000, which people are convinced that I still made $100,000 on that or something ridiculous. I just figured I'd have my time paid for, be there for a few days, and went up there with intention of helping the animal more than anything. Remember getting there and there being so many people at this park. It was a crazy experience. Taurus Drake, an officer from Chicago Animal Care and Control, picked me up at my hotel and drove me there. And remember, he had a very light sense of humor where he was chuckling with me the entire time we were driving, kind of telling me, he's like, man, there ain't no alligator in Humboldt Park. He's like, this whole thing's gonna, just relax. It's gonna be okay. Everything's gonna be good. We chuckled about a lot of stuff, and then we pull up there and go, wow, there's couple dozen people from different media groups, people selling t-shirts and buttons and food trucks, and you name the weirdness that was going on there at the time. It was very overwhelming and not the situation I was at all used to. Catching an alligator in a park is a very, very common thing for me, but in a situation like that, of course, with that much attention, was very different. When I got there, I remember telling Kelly, I said, hey, when I get there, I'd like to meet with the heads of the different departments in that area. I remember walking up there, meeting her and them, shaking their hands and going, yeah, guys, I got to go for a walk. And I just turned around and walked away. And I remember Kelly saying since then, she's like, we were kind of like, for a minute, a little bit insulted that you met us and just walked away. And then we went, you know what? He wants to get to work, which is exactly what it was going on. I was a little bit overwhelmed, and I went, you know what's going to help me feel a little bit more at ease to start digging into this. So it started right then, walking the park, talking to people, trying to find out the real lay of the land of the situation, which was a humongous area. Those of you from the Humboldt Park area know that it's a lot more than just the lagoon. It's several different little canals and streams and lakes that go off of there that are all pretty much covered in lily pads, which does not make it the easiest area to find something. So I knew my best luck was going to be there at nighttime. So ended up telling them, like, look, shut the park down if you can and turn the lights off so I can kind of work in darkness. And they had the lake, the area surrounded by a police barrier. And then inside of that, they had a extra fence. And then along the side of the pond, they had a fence. So when you wanted to go somewhere and see something, you had to jump 3 barriers to get to it. So I remember that night, the first night I went out there, they had a detail from Chicago PD that was supposed to be hanging with me. I lost them pretty quick in, but Officer Drake was there with me all night. He stayed by my side, even though we were both exhausted. Remember, we walked that place for probably 8 hours until I finally saw like a glimpse of this little alligator eye. And I'm thinking, wow, is that possibly what I've been praying for and looking for? You know, got to remember during the night too, we had the mayor call in for a couple of updates. Kelly Gandersky herself was there with us for about the first hour until the mosquitoes tried to carry her away, and she gave up there pretty quick. Which, I mean, honestly, that's, you know, she knew too that it was my thing and was going to let me get to it. But we were so exhausted, just so exhausted. Saw this thing. Remember, Drake was in the truck, so I went and jumped all the barriers, went back to the truck, and kind of knocked on the window, and I went, "Hey, dude, don't say a word. Grab your stuff. Let's go catch an alligator." And he kind of just looked at me, and I said, "Yeah, come on." So we jump all the barriers, go back to where we're at. I had him stand like really close to me and put the flashlight up, and I said, "You see what I'm looking at?" And he said, "No, I'm not seeing it." I'm like, "Come here." Like, I grabbed him, pulled him closer to me. I'm like, "You see what I'm looking at?" He goes, "Yeah, I see it." I said, "All right, I'm gonna go around there. I'm gonna cast the line out. I'm gonna hook this thing up. I'm gonna hand the fishing rod off to you. And then we're not taking any chances on this. I'm gonna go a little bit off the deep end, but I'm gonna jump out there and grab him, and we'll go from there. Because if the hook comes off this thing, we're never gonna see it again." So went around there, called a couple of times, got him to come out a little bit further from the lily pads, hooked him up, hand the fishing rod immediately off to Drake. When he was holding that, when I got the thing in close, he was holding that. I went out in the water, grabbed the gator, remember taking his tail, sticking it between my legs, and took him and stuck him on the bank. And whenever I did, I had Drake take the catch pole that he had and stick it around his neck, so we knew we were sure that things were going to work out. And tying the little guy up, taping him up, and remember Drake going, "You know, your life just changed." I said, "What are you talking about, man? I do this kind of stuff all the time. How is my life going to change via this?" And he goes, he's like, "You've never caught a gator in Chicago before. You don't understand. Your life has literally just changed because of this one little alligator up here." And just like now, I remember shedding some tears. And while he wouldn't admit to it, he did too. And we kind of had a moment between the two of us, kind of just sat down and enjoyed it for a second, had a good cry. And yeah, the rest is kind of history. You know, a lot of amazing things have happened since then, but little did I know that was going to save my life. As a kid, I remember, you know, being blessed and to be raised by an amazing family, great parents that have always been a huge blessing to me through everything I've done. Grandparents live across the street from each other. Really, really cool way to grow up. Truly thankful for all that. And my uncle, when I was probably in middle school, started working for Game and Fish, long before Fish and Wildlife existed in the state of Florida. And I would occasionally go with him, you know, and watch him work, long before I helped him work, but I would watch him work. If he needed help having something handed to him, I would help him. And in high school, I started actually helping him. And I would go out with him, and people would be like, "Yeah, man, this is Gator Bill, this is your protege, isn't it?" And I'd be like, no. Like, there's no way I want to do this for a living. The first time I ever rode with my uncle, I remember going out to a place and him walking to this seawall. He's like, "I've been after this gator for a long time. He's in this pipe. Meet me at the road." And I went, what are you talking about? Meet you at the road? And he drops off the side of a seawall, and I'm going, this guy is out of his mind. This is crazy. Go out to the road, to the culvert pipe, and he pushes this lid off, and here comes Uncle Bill, pushing an alligator out ahead of him and then crawling out of this culvert pipe. And I went, there is no way I'm ever going to be doing that. That's man, that's a lot. And people are always like, "Yeah, so you're gonna be Bill's protege. You're going to take over when he's done." And for years, I was like, no, I don't think, like, when Uncle Bill stops doing it, I'm going to stop doing it. I don't think this is going to be my life. And every time I did that, the good Lord always turned me around and put me back on the same path. Like, you know what? This is where you're supposed to be. It was consistently over and over again. And, you know, it's very hard sometimes to understand God's plan for you. But when you're in situations, sometimes you start to understand, you know what, I was put here for a reason. This is my reason, and you just go ahead and embrace it. And that's where eventually I got to. Was out catching a gator one day and was in a random backyard. I think it was an aggravating day. I was exhausted. It was super hot, which happens when you work outside for a living. You get hot and get kind of grumpy. It was a grumpy day. And this lady, her name was Chris, she invited me to church. She's like, hey, my dad's a preacher at a local church. Why don't you come to church with us sometime? And I was like, well, that doesn't sound like a bad idea. Sure, I'll go to church. Remember going to that church and sitting down in a back pew and listening to this guy preach and going, man, like, what is wrong with me? Like, why am I getting all emotional? What is this all about? Like, what? I don't understand. What's this guy's talking about? Accepting the Lord into your life and all these things and these terms I haven't heard of before. And it was that next day I sat down with him and talked to him about this and accepted the Lord into my life. And ironically, that was 7 years to the day after that I got the call to go to Chicago and actually caught Chance 7 years to the day after accepting the Lord into my life. The opportunities I've been provided since catching Chance the Snapper in Chicago are truly unbelievable. It's God's grace, and a perfect example of God's grace. Everything from having a publicist and Betsy Shepard up in Chicago, to being able to go golf with Joel Murray and his brothers in Chicago, do events with them. Met so many amazing people, done so many amazing things. I just overwhelmed by God's grace continually. So the day before I went to Chicago to catch Chance, I actually started a nonprofit. It's called EEARSS. It's Environmental Education, Awareness, Research, Support, and Services. We jokingly say it's the longest acronym on the planet, or EEARSS. But started that the day before I went up there. So again, that's God's plan working out together at the same time. Now we are blessed to do biodiversity research for Brevard County, where I live. We do that for DOD. We catch and sample alligators with the University of Louisville, where we're looking at cancer research. So we're doing cancer research with them through alligators. We're taking blood, we're taking tissue, we're looking at chromosome breaks, we're looking at ecotoxicology in the local environment through their blood, them being an apex predator, their endocrine system, and a lot of other cool things. Lots and lots of education. We'll average about 100 educational programs a year. I just am continually, again, overwhelmed by the good Lord just putting you on a path, making sure you're where you need to be, and keeping you to it. It's God's blessings are truly overwhelming when you have Him first in everything you do. So I just want to say, really praise God for the amazing opportunities that have been provided to me, the blessing of this little alligator in my life, the St. Augustine Alligator Farm, the city of Chicago, and my friends and family everywhere. Would not be where I am today without truly, God's grace and all of you all. Thank you very much. And nobody wants to cooperate. Yeah, he kind of turned his head and looked and was like, yeah, it ain't happening, homie. Did that one time, ain't doing it a second time. Fell for that once, it ain't going to happen again. Who do you think I am? I'm Chance the Snapper. Doing my thing, hanging out in the sun, working on my tan. What you messing with me for?